Very well, Kotick, but you can't come from no one knows where and order us off like this. Remember, we've been fighting for our nurseries, and that's a thing you never did. You preferred prowling about in the sea. The other seals laughed at this, and the young seal began twisting his head from side to side. He had just married that year, and was making a great fuss about it. I've no nursery to fight for, said Kotick. I only want to show you all a place where you will be safe. What's the use of fighting? Oh, if you're trying to back out, of course I've no more to say, said the young seal with an ugly chuckle. Will you come with me if I win? Said Kotick. And a green light came into his eye, for he was very angry at having to fight at all. Very good, said the young seal carelessly. If you win, I'll come. He had no time to change his mind, for Kotick's head was out and his teeth sunk in the blubber of the young seal's neck. Then he threw himself back on his haunches and hauled his enemy down the beach, shook him, and knocked him over. Then Kotick roared to the seals, I've done my best for you these 5 seasons past. I've found you the island where you'll be safe, but unless your heads are dragged off your silly necks you won't believe. I'm going to teach you now. Look out for yourselves. Limmershin told me that never in his life, and Limmershin sees 10,000 big seals fighting every year, never in all his little life did he see anything like Kotick's charge into the nurseries. He flung himself at the biggest sea catch he could find, caught him by the throat, choked him and bumped him and banged him till he grunted for mercy, and then threw him aside and attacked the next. You see, Kotick had never fasted for 4 months as the big seals did every year, and his deep-sea swimming trips kept him in perfect condition, and, best of all, he had never fought before. His curly white mane stood up with rage, and his eyes flamed, and his big dog teeth glistened, and he was splendid to look at. Old Sea Catch, his father, saw him tearing past, hauling the grizzled old seals about as though they had been halibut, and upsetting the young bachelors in all directions, and Sea Catch gave a roar and shouted, he may be a fool, but he is the best fighter on the beaches. Don't tackle your father, my son. He's with you. Kotick roared in answer, and old Sea Catch waddled in with his mustache on end, blowing like a locomotive, while Matka and the seal that was going to marry Kotick cowered down and admired their menfolk. It was a gorgeous fight, for the two fought as long as there was a seal that dared lift up his head, and when there were none they paraded grandly up and down the beach side by side, bellowing. At night, just as the northern lights were winking and flashing through the fog, Kotick climbed a bare rock and looked down on the scattered nurseries and the torn and bleeding seals. Now, he said, I've taught you your lesson. My wig, said old Sea Catch, boosting himself up stiffly, for he was fearfully mauled. The killer whale himself could not have cut them up worse. Son, I'm proud of you, and what's more, I'll come with you to your island if there is such a place. Hear you, fat pigs of the sea. Who comes with me to the sea cow's tunnel? Answer, or I shall teach you again, roared Kotick. There was a murmur like the ripple of the tide all up and down the beaches. We will come, said thousands of tired voices. We will follow Kotick, the white seal. Then Kotick dropped his head between his shoulders and shut his eyes proudly. He was not a white seal any more, but red from head to tail. All the same he would have scorned to look at or touch one of his wounds. A week later he and his army, nearly 10,000 Hollischickian old seals, went away north to the sea cow's tunnel, Kotick leading them, and the seals that stayed at Novostashna called them idiots. But next spring, when they all met off the fishing banks of the Pacific, Kotick seals told such tales of the new beaches beyond Sea Cow's tunnel that more and more seals left Novostashna. Of course it was not all done at once, for the seals are not very clever, and they need a long time to turn things over in their minds, but year after year more seals went away from Novostashna, and Lukannon, and the other nurseries, to the quiet, sheltered beaches where Kotick sits all the summer through, getting bigger and fatter and stronger each year, while the Hollischickie play around him, in that sea where no man comes. Lookin' on, this is the great deep-sea song that all the St. Paul seals sing when they are heading back to their beaches in the summer. It is a sort of very sad seal national anthem. I met my mates in the morning, and, oh, but I am old. Where roaring on the ledges the summer groundswell rolled, I heard them lift the chorus that drowned the breakers' song, the beaches of Lukannon, 2,000,000 voices strong. The song of pleasant stations beside the salt lagoons, the song of blowing squadrons that shuffled down the dunes, the song of midnight dances that churned the sea to flame, the beaches of Lukannon, before the sealers came. I met my mates in the morning, I'll never meet them more, they came and went in legions that darkened all the shore. And o'er the foam-flecked offing as far as voice could reach we hailed the landing parties and we sang them up the beach. The beaches of Lukannon, the winter wheat so tall, the dripping, crinkled lichens, and the sea fog drenching all. The platforms of our playground, all shining smooth and worn. The beaches of Lukannon, the home where we were born. I met my mates in the morning, a broken, scattered band. Men shoot us in the water and club us on the land, men drive us to the salt house like silly sheep and tame, and still we sing Lukannon, before the sealers came. We'll down to southward, oh, Govaruska, go. And tell the deep-sea viceroys the story of our woe, ere, empty as the shark's egg the tempest flings ashore, the beaches of Lukannon shall know their sons no more. Rikki-tikki-tavi, at the hole where he went in Red-Eye called to Wrinkle-Skin. Hear what little Red-Eye saith, nag, come up and dance with death. Eye to eye and head to head, keep the measure, nag. This shall end when one is dead, at thy pleasure, nag. Turn for turn and twist for twist, run and hide thee, nag. Ha! The hooded death has missed. Woe betide thee, nag. This is the story of the Great War that Rikki-tikki-tavi fought single-handed, through the bathrooms of the big bungalow in Segoli cantonment. Darzee, the tailor bird, helped him, and Chuchundra, the muskrat, who never comes out into the middle of the floor, but always creeps round by the wall, gave him advice, but Rikki-tikki did the real fighting. He was a mongoose, rather like a little cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg, front or back, that he chose to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush, and his war cry as he scuttled through the long grass was, Rick-tick-ticky-ticky-tchk. One day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his father and mother, and carried him, kicking and clucking, down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there, and clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun on the middle of a garden path, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother, "let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him into the house, and a big man picked him up between his finger and thumb and said he was not dead but half choked. So they wrapped him in cotton wool, and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. "Now," said the big man, he was an Englishman who had just moved into the bungalow, "don't frighten him, and we'll see what he'll do." It is the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from nose to tail with curiosity. The motto of all the mongoose family is, "Run and find out," and Rikki-tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided that it was not good to eat, ran all round the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself, and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. "That's his way of making friends." "Ouch! He's tickling under my chin," said Teddy. Rikki-tikki looked down between the boy's collar and neck, snuffed at his ear, and climbed down to the floor, where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother, "and that's a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him." All mongooses are like that, said her husband. If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail, or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat. They gave him a little piece of raw meat. Rikki-Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished he went out into the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. There are more things to find out about in this house, he said to himself, than all my family could find out in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out. He spent all that day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtubs, put his nose into the ink on a writing table, and burned it on the end of the big man's cigar, for he climbed up in the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At nightfall he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lighted, and when Teddy went to bed Rikki-Tikki climbed up too. But he was a restless companion, because he had to get up and attend to every noise all through the night, and find out what made it. Teddy's mother and father came in, the last thing, to look at their boy, and Rikki-Tikki was awake on the pillow. I don't like that, said Teddy's mother. He may bite the child. He'll do no such thing, said the father. Teddy's safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now, but Teddy's mother wouldn't think of anything so awful. Early in the morning Rikki-Tikki came to early breakfast in the veranda riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him banana and some boiled egg. He sat on all their laps one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to be a house mongoose someday and have rooms to run about in, and Rikki-Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house at Segali, had carefully told Rikki what to do if ever he came across white men. Then Rikki-Tikki went out into the garden to see what was to be seen. It was a large garden, only half cultivated, with bushes, as big as summer houses, of Marshall Neil roses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboos, and thickets of high grass. Rikki-Tikki licked his lips. This is a splendid hunting ground, he said, and his tail grew bottle-brushy at the thought of it, and he scuttled up and down the garden, snuffing here and there till he heard very sorrowful voices in a thorn bush. It was Darzee, the tailor bird, and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling two big leaves together and stitching them up the edges with fibers, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. The nest swayed to and fro, as they sat on the rim and cried. "What is the matter?" asked Rikki-Tikki. "We are very miserable," said Darzee. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday and Nag ate him." Said Rikki-Tikki, "that is very sad, but I am a stranger here." "Who is Nag?" Darzee and his wife only cowered down in the nest without answering, for from the thick grass at the foot of the bush there came a low hiss, a horrid cold sound that made Rikki-Tikki jump back 2 clear feet. Then inch by inch out of the grass rose up the head and spread hood of Nag, the big black cobra, and he was 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself clear of the ground, he stayed balancing to and fro exactly as a dandelion tuft balances in the wind, and he looked at Rikki-Tikki with the wicked snake's eyes that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking of. "Who is Nag?" said he. "I am Nag. The great god Brahm put his mark upon all our people, when the first cobra spread his hood to keep the sun off Brahm as he slept. Look, and be afraid." He spread out his hood more than ever, and Rikki-Tikki saw the spectacle mark on the back of it that looks exactly like the eye part of a hook and eye fastening. He was afraid for the minute, but it is impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time, and though Rikki-Tikki had never met a live cobra before, his mother had fed him on dead ones, and he knew that all a grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. Nag knew that too, and, at the bottom of his cold heart, he was afraid. "Well," said Rikki-Tikki, and his tail began to fluff up again, "marks or no marks, do you think it is right for you to eat fledglings out of a nest?" Nag was thinking to himself, and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki-Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for him and his family, but he wanted to get Rikki Tikki off his guard. So he dropped his head a little, and put it on one side. "Let us talk," he said. "You eat eggs. Why should not I eat birds?" "Behind you. Look behind you," sang Darzi. Rikki Tikki knew better than to waste time in staring. He jumped up in the air as high as he could go, and just under him whizzed by the head of Nagina, Nag's wicked wife. She had crept up behind him as he was talking, to make an end of him. He heard her savage hiss as the stroke missed. He came down almost across her back, and if he had been an old mongoose he would have known that then was the time to break her back with one bite, but he was afraid of the terrible lashing return stroke of the cobra. He bit, indeed, but did not bite long enough, and he jumped clear of the whisking tail, leaving Nagina torn and angry. "Wicked, wicked Darzi," said Nag, lashing up as high as he could reach toward the nest in the thorn bush. But Darzi had built it out of reach of snakes, and it only swayed to and fro. Rikki Tikki felt his eyes growing red and hot. When a mongoose's eyes grow red, he is angry, and he sat back on his tail and hind legs like a little kangaroo, and looked all round him, and chattered with rage. But Nag and Nagina had disappeared into the grass. When a snake misses its stroke, it never says anything or gives any sign of what it means to do next. Rikki Tikki did not care to follow them, for he did not feel sure that he could manage 2 snakes at once. So he trotted off to the gravel path near the house, and sat down to think. It was a serious matter for him. If you read the old books of natural history, you will find they say that when the mongoose fights the snake and happens to get bitten, he runs off and eats some herb that cures him. That is not true. The victory is only a matter of quickness of eye and quickness of foot. Snakes blow against mongooses jump, and as no eye can follow the motion of a snake's head when it strikes, this makes things much more wonderful than any magic herb. Rikki Tikki knew he was a young mongoose, and it made him all the more pleased to think that he had managed to escape a blow from behind. It gave him confidence in himself, and when Teddy came running down the path, Rikki Tikki was ready to be petted. But just as Teddy was stooping, something wriggled a little in the dust, and a tiny voice said, "Be careful. I am Death." It was Ch07, the dusty brown snakeling that lies for choice on the dusty earth, and his bite is as dangerous as the cobra's. But he is so small that nobody thinks of him, and so he does the more harm to people. Rikki Tikki's eyes grew red again, and he danced up to Ch07 with the peculiar rocking, swaying motion that he had inherited from his family. It looks very funny, but it is so perfectly balanced a gait that you can fly off from it at any angle you please, and in dealing with snakes this is an advantage. If Rikki Tikki had only known, he was doing a much more dangerous thing than fighting Nag, for Ch07 is so small, and can turn so quickly, that unless Rikki bit him close to the back of the head, he would get the return stroke in his eye or his lip. But Rikki did not know. His eyes were all red, and he rocked back and forth, looking for a good place to hold. Ch07 struck out. Rikki jumped sideways and tried to run in, but the wicked little dusty gray head lashed within a fraction of his shoulder, and he had to jump over the body, and the head followed his heels close. Teddy shouted to the house, "Oh, look here. Our mongoose is killing a snake." And Rikki Tikki heard a scream from Teddy's mother. His father ran out with a stick, but by the time he came up, Ch07 had lunged out once too far, and Rikki Tikki had sprung, jumped on the snake's back, dropped his head far between his forelegs, bitten as high up the back as he could get hold, and rolled away. That bite paralyzed Ch07, and Rikki Tikki was just going to eat him up from the tail, after the custom of his family at dinner, when he remembered that a full meal makes a slow mongoose, and if he wanted all his strength and quickness ready, he must keep himself thin. He went away for a dust bath under the castor oil bushes, while Teddy's father beat the dead Ch07. What is the use of that, thought Rikki Tikki. I have settled it all, and then Teddy's mother picked him up from the dust and hugged him, crying that he had saved Teddy from death, and Teddy's father said that he was a providence, and Teddy looked on with big scared eyes. Rikki Tikki was rather amused at all the fuss, which, of course, he did not understand. Teddy's mother might just as well have petted Teddy for playing in the dust. Rikki was thoroughly enjoying himself. That night at dinner, walking to and fro among the wine glasses on the table, he might have stuffed himself 3 times over with nice things. But he remembered Nag and Nagina, and though it was very pleasant to be patted and petted by Teddy's mother, and to sit on Teddy's shoulder, his eyes would get red from time to time, and he would go off into his long war cry of Rick tick ticky ticky tchk. Teddy carried him off to bed, and insisted on Rikki Tikki sleeping under his chin. Rikki Tikki was too well bred to bite or scratch, but as soon as Teddy was asleep he went off for his nightly walk round the house, and in the dark he ran up against Ch07, the muskrat, creeping around by the wall. Ch07 is a broken-hearted little beast. He whimpers and cheeps all the night, trying to make up his mind to run into the middle of the room. But he never gets there. "Don't kill me," said Ch07, almost weeping. "Rikki Tikki, don't kill me." "Do you think a snake killer kills muskrats?" said Rikki Tikki scornfully. "Those who kill snakes get killed by snakes," said Ch07, more sorrowfully than ever. "And how am I to be sure that Nag won't mistake me for you some dark night?" "There's not the least danger," said Rikki Tikki. "But Nag is in the garden, and I know you don't go there." "My cousin Chua, the rat, told me," said Ch07, and then he stopped. "Told you what?" "Hsh. Nag is everywhere, Rikki Tikki. You should have talked to Chua in the garden." "I didn't, so you must tell me." "Quick, Ch07, or I'll bite you." Ch07 sat down and cried till the tears rolled off his whiskers. "I am a very poor man," he sobbed. "I never had spirit enough to run out into the middle of the room." "Hsh. I mustn't tell you anything. Can't you hear, Rikki Tikki?" Rikki Tikki listened. The house was as still, but he thought he could just catch the faintest scratch in the world, a noise as faint as that of a wasp walking on a windowpane, the dry scratch of a snake's scales on brickwork. "That's Nag or Nagina," he said to himself, "and he is crawling into the bathroom sluice." "You're right, Ch07, I should have talked to Chua." He stole off to Teddy's bathroom, but there was nothing there, and then to Teddy's mother's bathroom. At the bottom of the smooth plaster wall there was a brick pulled out to make a sluice for the bath water, and as Rikki Tikki stole in by the masonry curb where the bath is put, he heard Nag and Nagina whispering together outside in the moonlight. "When the house is emptied of people," said Nagina to her husband, "he will have to go away, and then the garden will be our own again. Go in quietly, and remember that the big man who killed Karite is the first one to bite. Then come out and tell me, and we will hunt for Rikki Tikki together." "But are you sure that there is anything to be gained by killing the people?" said Nag. "Everything. When there were no people in the bungalow, did we have any mongoose in the garden? So long as the bungalow is empty, we are king and queen of the garden, and remember that as soon as our eggs in the melon bed hatch, as they may tomorrow, our children will need room and quiet." "I had not thought of that," said Nag. "I will go, but there is no need that we should hunt for Rikki Tikki afterward. I will kill the big man and his wife, and the child if I can, and come away quietly. Then the bungalow will be empty, and Rikki Tikki will go." Rikki Tikki tingled all over with rage and hatred at this, and then Nag's head came through the sluice, and his 5 feet of cold body followed it. Angry as he was, Rikki Tikki was very frightened as he saw the size of the big cobra. Nag coiled himself up, raised his head, and looked into the bathroom in the dark, and Rikki could see his eyes glitter. "Now, if I kill him here, Nagina will know, and if I fight him on the open floor, the odds are in his favor. What am I to do?" said Rikki Tikki Tavi. Nag waved to and fro, and then Rikki Tikki heard him drinking from the biggest water jar that was used to fill the bath. "That is good," said the snake. Now, when Ch07 was killed, the big man had a stick. He may have that stick still, but when he comes in to bathe in the morning he will not have a stick. I shall wait here till he comes. Nagena, do you hear me? I shall wait here in the cool till daytime. There was no answer from outside, so Rikki-Tikki knew Nagena had gone away. Nag coiled himself down, coil by coil, round the bulge at the bottom of the water jar, and Rikki-Tikki stayed still as death. After an hour he began to move, muscle by muscle, toward the jar. Nag was asleep, and Rikki-Tikki looked at his big back, wondering which would be the best place for a good hold. If I don't break his back at the first jump, said Rikki, he can still fight. And if he fights, oh Rikki. He looked at the thickness of the neck below the hood, but that was too much for him, and a bite near the tail would only make Nag savage. It must be the head, he said at last, the head above the hood. And, when I am once there, I must not let go. Then he jumped. The head was lying a little clear of the water jar, under the curve of it, and, as his teeth met, Rikki braced his back against the bulge of the red earthenware to hold down the head. This gave him just 1 second's purchase, and he made the most of it. Then he was battered to and fro as a rat is shaken by a dog, to and fro on the floor, up and down, and around in great circles, but his eyes were red and he held on as the body cart whipped over the floor, upsetting the tin dipper and the soap dish and the flesh brush, and banged against the tin side of the bath. As he held he closed his jaws tighter and tighter, for he made sure he would be banged to death, and, for the honor of his family, he preferred to be found with his teeth locked. He was dizzy, aching, and felt shaken to pieces when something went off like a thunderclap just behind him. A hot wind knocked him senseless and red fire singed his fur. The big man had been wakened by the noise, and had fired both barrels of a shotgun into Nag just behind the hood. Rikki-Tikki held on with his eyes shut, for now he was quite sure he was dead. But the head did not move, and the big man picked him up and said, "It's the mongoose again, Alice. The little chap has saved our lives now." Then Teddy's mother came in with a very white face, and saw what was left of Nag, and Rikki-Tikki dragged himself to Teddy's bedroom and spent half the rest of the night shaking himself tenderly to find out whether he really was broken into 40 pieces, as he fancied. When morning came he was very stiff, but well pleased with his doings. "Now I have Nagena to settle with, and she will be worse than 5 nags, and there's no knowing when the eggs she spoke of will hatch. Goodness! I must go and see Darzee," he said. Without waiting for breakfast, Rikki-Tikki ran to the thorn bush where Darzee was singing a song of triumph at the top of his voice. The news of Nag's death was all over the garden, for the sweeper had thrown the body on the rubbish heap. "Oh, you stupid tuft of feathers," said Rikki-Tikki angrily. "Is this the time to sing?" "Nag is dead, is dead, is dead," sang Darzee. The valiant Rikki-Tikki caught him by the head and held fast. The big man brought the bang stick, and Nag fell in 2 pieces. "He will never eat my babies again." "All that's true enough. But where's Nagena?" said Rikki-Tikki, looking carefully round him. Nagena came to the bathroom sluice and called for Nag. Darzee went on, and Nag came out on the end of a stick. The sweeper picked him up on the end of a stick and threw him upon the rubbish heap. "Let us sing about the great, the red-eyed Rikki-Tikki." And Darzee filled his throat and sang. "If I could get up to your nest, I'd roll your babies out," said Rikki-Tikki. "You don't know when to do the right thing at the right time. You're safe enough in your nest there, but it's war for me down here. Stop singing a minute, Darzee." "For the great, the beautiful Rikki-Tikki's sake I will stop," said Darzee. "What is it, O killer of the terrible Nag? Where is Nagena, for the 3rd time?" "On the rubbish heap by the stables, mourning for Nag." "Great is Rikki-Tikki with the white teeth." "Bother my white teeth." "Have